Welcome to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're taking a massive, incredibly complex subject and, well, breaking it down into a really clear, structured format. If you love organized learning and want to grasp huge concepts efficiently, you're in the perfect place. Today, we're throwing open the heavy stone doors to the ancient world and making the chaotic lore of Greek mythology crystal clear. Let's get into it. Before there were superheroes, there was Olympus. Think about that for a second. These Greek myths, they aren't just dusty old stories from some forgotten age. No way. They are the absolute original blueprint for human drama, intense divine jealousy, raw heroism, and just total, unchecked chaos. From the betrayals that literally birthed the world to the monsters that still kind of haunt our modern imagination, these are the foundational narratives of the Western world. And today, we're cracking them wide open. Okay, so here's our roadmap for how we're going to unpack this massive web of lore step by step. 1. The original cinematic universe. 2. The mythological labyrinth. 3. The Gemini notebook solution. 4. The 3 cosmic layers. And finally, 5. Ancient psychological thrillers. Let's dive right in.
Section 1. The original cinematic universe, the blueprint for human drama.
So it's absolutely crucial we frame our mindset right from the start here. We're dealing with stories that shaped entire civilizations. Now, when we think of modern cinematic universes, we think of organized linear storytelling, right? Consistent continuity. You know exactly how character A relates to event B. But Greek mythology? Oh, it is the exact opposite. We're talking hundreds of gods, shifting genealogies, totally contradictory versions of events. Trying to track all this messy lore entirely in your head? Yeah, that's a guaranteed way to get absolutely lost.
Which brings us to Section 2, the mythological labyrinth, navigating the chaos.
To truly understand the stories of Olympus, we first have to just acknowledge the absolute chaos of the source material. This labyrinth is notoriously difficult to navigate. Hundreds of gods, shifting genealogies, and, like I mentioned, a dozen different versions of every single event. For example, depending on the ancient source you read, the god of love, Eros, is either this primordial being born at the literal dawn of time or just the son of Aphrodite. The text evolved over centuries, making it a really massive problem for anyone trying to study this stuff today.
Moving to Section 3, the Gemini notebook solution, taming the lore. Now, we don't just point out problems here, right? We find structured solutions. If human memory isn't enough to track a dozen versions of a single myth, we need a methodology that instantly turns this mass of contradictory myths into a clean, searchable archive. It's basically a 3-step process. Step 1, we feed the Gemini notebook all the ancient texts, historical analysis, and detailed character logs. Step 2, the tool instantly generates a clear, interactive timeline. And Step 3, we connect the dots in seconds. What used to take weeks of, cross-referencing dusty library books can now be synthesized immediately. It is a real game changer.
To put that into perspective, with this setup, you can literally hover over a name like Zeus and instantly get a targeted summary. Or you can query the notebook to track the exact moment of a hero's downfall. You can ask it something super specific like, how does the story of the Hydra specifically connect to Heracles' redemption? And just watch it generate the answer by synthesizing those complex webs in seconds. It brings just immense credibility and speed to the entire research process.
All right, let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds, the 3 cosmic layers, decoding the cosmos. So, now that we have the tools to actually tame this chaos, we need a core framework to decode the Greek cosmos itself. To make any sense of all this data, we have to separate these stories into 3 highly organized, distinct buckets: the Olympians, the heroes, and the monsters. By filtering every single myth through these 3 specific categories, this chaotic universe suddenly becomes incredibly well organized and approachable. Let's look at each one.
First up, we have the Olympians. They are chaotic, immortal rulers. But to really grasp them, we kind of need to stop thinking of them as traditional gods, in the modern sense of the word. Instead, they're far better understood as a massive, deeply dysfunctional family that just happens to have reality-bending powers. The absolutely crucial point here is that they're driven by raw, amplified human flaws. We're talking about Zeus's constant paranoia. We're talking about Hera's cold, calculated vengeance. And we're talking about the incredibly complex web of children they brought into the world through all these conflicts. This immense, divine dysfunction is literally what birthed the mythological world as we know it.
Next, we drop down a layer to the heroes. Think of figures like Achilles, Heracles, Odysseus. And it's so important to recognize that these famous figures weren't simply good guys. Actually, scratch that. That's completely a modern superhero trope. In Greek myth, heroes were deeply flawed, fiercely arrogant, and incredibly complex characters. They were driven by hubris, they constantly challenged the gods, and very often they paid a terrible, tragic price for it.
And finally, the third bucket, the monsters. Medusa, the Minotaur, the Hydra. These beasts are far more than just, scary physical obstacles for our heroes to punch. They are the physical embodiments of the terrors that the ancient Greeks simply couldn't explain. They represent the deepest, darkest anxieties of the ancient world made into flesh.
Which brings us to the climax of the explainer. Section 5. Ancient Psychological Thrillers. Decoding the Psychology.
Listen, we aren't here just to summarize plots and list names. If you really want to learn, we have to decode the underlying psychology of these narratives. I mean, why did the Greeks fear the sea so much that they created literal monsters to represent it? Why were they so entirely obsessed with the concept of fate and destiny? These aren't just fun world-building details. They reveal the true societal purpose of these myths. They were trying to process the unpredictable, highly dangerous world around them. And that really brings us to the major punchline of our analysis today. These ancient texts aren't just fantasy stories. They are, in fact, the world's first psychological thrillers. They are masterful explorations of the human psyche, projecting our internal fears, our family dramas, and our existential dread onto a massive cosmic canvas. This is exactly why using a structured tool like the Gemini Notebook is so incredibly invaluable. When you synthesize these complex stories into bite-sized breakdowns and epic deep dives, you don't just memorize who begat whom. You actually uncover the rich, psychological truths hiding beneath the surface of the labyrinth. You turn absolute chaos into deep, meaningful understanding. This is now your archive for everything mythological. Whether you're a writer looking for character inspiration, a student trying to untangle ancient history, or just someone who genuinely loves a good epic story, this structured approach is your new home for understanding the ancient world. The story of the gods is really just beginning. Now that we have the framework, the tools, and those 3 cosmic buckets established, the entire mythological universe is wide open to us. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Out of all the heroes, gods, and monsters we've discussed today, what specific myth do you want analyzed next? Think about the psychological thrillers hiding in this lore and let your curiosity guide you. Thank you so much for joining this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning the ancient world.